Everyone, and welcome to our Satsang. You may not feel like it's morning, but it is morning for at least one person who's here today. She is tuning in from 3 a.m. in Malta. So, for her, good morning. For the rest of us, good evening, or wherever you are, or whatever time you feel it is. I talked a little bit a couple weeks ago about moon time and how our time has been determined by people who may or may not have our spiritual interests in mind, and trying to understand moon time and working within moon time and the effects it has on the human body and the emotional states and the connective states. I still have not mastered that. That's one of my goals for 2020. So we'll see if that works out. Take a deep breath. Let it out. Okay. Welcome to tonight's Satsang. For those of us who do not have a longer experience in the tradition of Hinduism or perhaps Buddhism, don't know if they do it in Buddhism, a satsang is an opportunity to gather with believers for the purposes of strengthening each other. The example I gave last week was just like one stick is a small fire, when you start to add those sticks together, they burn more powerfully. If you're in any sort of real spiritual journey, aside from becoming a complete hermit and being in the mountains or in a cave to be alone with God, a spiritual community is useful and helpful. And so let me check a technical thing here real quick to make sure I have access to the chat, which I should be seeing, which I'm not seeing, just so... Can you hear me? I don't know where the chat went. Okay, that's weird. I need to find the chat. Well, I hope it decides to join me soon. Anyway, aside from I'm sorry if I'm not able to respond to comments as quickly as I wish because the chat is not showing up. Okay, we'll figure it out. Unless you're alone, a community is helpful because you do have streaming in on you at all times inputs from all sorts of places, and us more than ever before. Why is it possible to hear of wars and rumors of wars and earthquakes in diverse places? Because we have modern communications facilities, because we have news that's worldwide, and so your television and now your phone and your computer stream information on you all the time. And they tell you by inference what you're receiving. Is this important? What are we supposed to be focusing on? And if all of those sources of information are directing you in a certain way, consciously or unconsciously, look at Edward Bernays, the nephew of Freud, and what he did with propaganda, then you're going to go in that way. And any sort of spiritual journey, any sort of journey to the self, is going to be a bit like climbing a mountain. It's going to be a challenge. And so all the support you can get and more is helpful and necessary so that, so that you can make the most progress you can in the time allotted. So that is what a satsang is about. And a satsang, you come together with the believers, those who are on the spiritual journey, and strengthen one another. And the other part about it is to commune with the divine. So we play the game of Oracle, Orok the Oracle. We play the game of Oracle, and someone sits and plays that and receives any questions that may be there and answers them as well. I have a few questions prepared for today, so I've got plenty to talk about if y'all don't have much to ask, which was the case last week. But feel free to toss your questions in, and hopefully at some point I shall be able to find the chat among my many windows here. It must be under something. I'll figure it out and be able to answer them. But even if you don't, we've got plenty to talk about, or even if I can't find it, we have plenty to talk about today and share about today. So welcome. I'm happy to see you here, and I'm happy to continue this tradition, which I want to do every single Sunday this entire year, and this is the second one. So 2 down, 50 to go. Good. So now that we've all had a couple minutes to gather in and hopefully solve some of your technical issues, let's go ahead and begin a meditation. And so if you'll find a comfortable place to be, and what I recommend for meditation is comfy but not too comfy. In other words, lying down in like dead man's pose, you might fall asleep. So I'm going to say a chair where your back can be straight is great, a meditation pillow even better, or if you have difficulties with sitting long periods of time, then lying on your back with your knees up, especially on a firm surface, is a great way to do it. So if you place yourself in one of those conditions optimally and close your eyes and breathe deeply, and allow yourself to begin to notice your body as you perhaps have not today yet. Breathing in, breathing out. Breathing in, feeling the wave and the energy entering you. Breathing out. And once more, breathing in, nice and slow. And breathing out. Allowing yourself to relax. Nowhere else to go. Nothing else to do. Nothing to think about, worry about, be worried about. And if you're very brave, with your next breath in, allow yourself to make some sound as you release it. Very good. Breathing in. And breathing out with some sound. And as you continue, allow yourself to feel the energy sink within your body, to allow your body to let go, to feel the tension flowing down you like honey in a state of peace. Let go of the tension on the top of your head, your ears, your forehead, your cheeks, your shoulders, allowing yourself to relax your arms, your shoulder blades, your chest, your belly, your pelvis, allowing the relaxation to flow down your hips and your waist, down to your legs and your bum, relaxing, your knees relaxing, Your calves relaxing. Your ankles relaxing and your feet relaxing. Notice that relaxation. Very good. And just allow all the tension and stress that you might have been carrying previous to this moment flow out in your out breath. Good. And breathing in and breathing out. And allowing you to hold as much of that relaxation as you wish as you open your eyes and feel into and return into the space with us. The space that we've created together now through our shared intent, through our energetic merging, and through the magic which we will begin to explore as we allow ourselves to relax and feel and dive in to the connected presence which we are creating in this moment through technology across time and space. All right. So, if you have any comments, I think I have a way now that I'm going to get them, so feel free to send them through support. Thank you, Allison. And that said, I am excited today to share a little bit about the 10 virgins. I spoke about the 10 virgins not that long ago, and I looked at it and I didn't have much to say about it, surprisingly. But today that was knocking on my door, which is prescient and purposeful, and it came again. And so I'm going to go into the story of the 10 virgins and dissect it for maybe 10 or 20 different elements of it. We'll see how far we get today and talk about it in a way that I hope is useful. So, first of all, the parable of the 10 virgins happens in Matthew 25. And as far as I know, that's the only place it happens. So, what does that mean? Well, it comes right after Matthew 24. And if you remember Matthew 24, it is the entire instructions about the answer to the question from the disciples, when shall these things come and when shall the end of the world be? And so Jesus answers that question, let no man deceive you. And he continues and talks about earthquakes and wars, and they're going to deliver you up to be killed, and all sorts of nasty things are going to happen. And if this time wasn't shortened, then no one would survive. And it's pretty intense, and the abomination of desolation, the horrible thing in the holy place is one translation of that. All of that is in Matthew 24. So we're talking about parallel to Revelation, or parallel to the things that happen or would happen or could happen previous to either the second coming or the coming of the Son of Man. It's all in Matthew 24. The lightning from the east to the west, all of these things. And that is the context that we're in. And then right after that comes the parable of, it says, the 10 virgins. And virgins here is, well, okay, parable of the 10 virgins. We'll get back to that. We don't know if that's exactly chronologically spoken by Jesus. Here, let me answer this question, and then immediately let me roll on to this parable. We don't know if that happened. I don't know if that happened. But it is an interesting placement. And so I'm going to be using the contemporary English version of the Bible to talk about this, because I find it often much clearer than other versions. And so that one, right again, it says the story about 10 young women. So it's important to understand when you're talking about virgins as actual virgins in the Bible, because there's a different word for that, and that's used in Greek and Hebrew, and when you're talking about young women. And meaning the term virgin is just substitute for the word maiden, right? And this time we're talking about young women. We're talking about maidens. We're not talking about necessarily virgins. Okay, so 10 young women. So the thing that's interesting here, number one, all these things popped out at me today when I started thinking about it. Young, meaning inexperienced, and 2, women, not men. And so that's the context of how the parable is told. And then Jesus begins with, the kingdom of heaven is like. And whenever he says the kingdom of heaven, he's talking about one of a couple different things. One of them is your own spiritual transformation and healing, your enlightenment, your awakening. He's also talking about the structures of how things are optimally, heaven. In other words, Platonic ideals exist as concepts. Plato has said, well, ideally there's this thing, and ideally, if you think about the word, it means the idea of something, right? Ideally, a wheel is perfectly round. So you have this concept of a wheel perfectly round. Then you build the wheel. A wheel will never be perfectly round, right? It may be infinitesimally, nowadays technology is pretty advanced, so infinitesimally not round, but the ideal of the wheel is perfectly round. And the ideal of the wheel is it has no friction or drag. So you have this ideal, and then you model it in practicality on the earth, and you have limits to things. And so we have the kingdom of heaven and the structures of heaven that exist for Jesus conceptually, and he's trying to provide you with both a map and a blueprint for how things should be, how things could be, as earth as it is in heaven. In other words, if we have our ideal and we take the Platonic ideal and we create it on earth, except for it's Jesus' ideal, and we create it on earth, what would it look like? What would it be like? And I remember sitting with my friend, again, March 10th, 2020, talking about these things, and he said, wow, people are going to have to change a lot before they're ready for that. And that's where I was coming from. Well, this is the ideal I see. This is the ideal I see Jesus presenting. This is what I see him talking about. And so I want to present the ideal and say, okay, people, here is a blueprint. If you've read 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he starts out with the map is not the territory. In other words, we all have maps or structures of how things should be. We have structures of how family life should be, how government life should be, how religion should be, how work should be. Education, every system, medical, everything else. We have these systems that are given to us, and we have these maps. And then as we begin to go into the world, we find ourselves using these maps. We're looking down at the map, and we may walk into a wall somewhere. And we say, wait a second, this wall is not on the map. This was not, if I have a map to happiness that was given to me by my family, by those who love me, I thought, I felt, or they thought too, and then I hit a wall, wait a second, it wasn't on the map, or I end up in a canyon where it's a dead end and I can't get out, then the map was inaccurate, right? And so the map, what 7 Habits says, Covey says, is the map is not the territory. So we have our maps and we live our maps, and the territory may be dramatically different. And if the territory is different, then we need an updated map. So when Jesus starts talking about the kingdom of heaven, he says, let me give you a new map. This is what it's like in heaven. This is the ideal, and let's create it here. Okay, so he says the kingdom of heaven is like, and he's giving you a map for how things are compared to how we may think things are, right? And he's updating our maps. And it's my experience is Jesus' maps have been almost completely ignored by almost everyone through time and up till the present. And if we actually started to look at the maps and apply them, we'd have a much happier existence. So that said, the kingdom of heaven is like, he's giving us a map of this story, a map of existence and reality and an ideal to apply with this story. The kingdom of heaven is like what happened one night when 10 young women took their oil lamps and went to a wedding to meet the groom. Okay, first of all, young women. Okay, we'll get to that. Wedding to meet the groom. Why are there so many wedding stories in the Bible? Why is Jesus constantly talking about weddings, showing up at weddings? Well, what is a wedding? If you've been to an Occidental wedding, my sister was invited to a wedding in India. And when she was invited, they sent her 3 outfits. The wedding, the groom or the father of the bride, or I think it was the father of the bride, bought 3 separate outfits for her to wear because the party and the celebration, the feast lasts 3 days. She had to learn a Bollywood dance to take to the wedding, and then when they had the wedding, it was a multi-day affair where they were getting down, where they were having fun, they were doing dances, they had feasts, they had presentations, and it was this gigantic structured thing. So Occident, and then there's a song by Gogol Bordello, Have You Ever Been to an American Wedding? And he talks about how boring American weddings are on the other side. So when we hear about weddings, we think, oh, wedding. And he says, well, you know, by midnight, we're patching up the cords, and I got to work tomorrow, and I got to go. And he's from the East, you know, Russian weddings. I think he's Hungarian, but Russian weddings, same thing. Like, it's a multi-day affair. Everything stops. We're just completely dedicated to this party, to this celebration. And he says, well, American weddings aren't like that. They're pretty boring most of the time. So we don't understand this, but the reason Jesus is talking about weddings so much, I believe, or at least one part of it, is because that's the ultimate celebration in the Occidental realm. These are the biggest parties. He could describe a giant party, but they don't have a context for it except for a wedding. And so they talk about wedding feasts and wedding parties and the bridegroom, and all of these parables and all of these stories are about weddings. And the reason is because that's the greatest joy. That's the greatest fun. That's where we, if you'll notice, by the time this parable is done, we don't talk about the bride. We don't talk about the groom and their relationship. We don't talk about any of those things. We're talking about the event that you want to get to. And it's important to get to before the doors close. And so that's what he's talking about. Imagine a fun event. And so this is another aspect of Jesus where he's involved in fun, where he's involved in pleasure, where he's involved in celebrations, where he's involved in enjoyment and pushing that, the abundant life, right? So you want to get to this wedding, not necessarily because it represents anything, but because the experience of being at a wedding is a party. And that's it. It's a chance to kick off your shoes and have fun, and that's what we're doing. So anyway, they went to a wedding to meet the groom, and this is customary how it happens there. 5 of them were foolish and 5 were wise. The foolish ones took their lamps, but no extra oil. The ones who were wise took along extra oil for their lamps. The groom was late arriving, and the young women became drowsy and fell asleep. Okay, so lamps, but no oil. You've got to assume that the way that it always worked for them before is we just take our lamps, and we don't need extra bottles of oil because this thing happens in a certain way, and this is how it happens every time. And why worry about it? But for some reason, some of them took extra oil anyway, the wise ones. And then it takes longer than they planned. They become tired. They fall asleep. Then in the middle of the night, someone shouted, "Here's the groom. Come to meet him." When the women got up and started getting their lamps ready, the foolish ones said to the others, "Let us have some of your oil. Our lamps are going out." Those who were wise answered, "There's not enough oil for all of us. Go and buy some for yourselves." While the foolish ones were on their way to get some oil, the groom arrived. The 5 who were ready went into the wedding, and the doors were closed. Later, the others returned and shouted, "Sir, sir, open the door for us." But the groom replied, "I don't even know you. So, my disciples, always be ready. You don't know the day or the time when all this will happen." So that last verse, you don't know the time or the date when all this will happen, seems like he's connecting it to Matthew 24. In other words, there's going to be a big event, and you're going to be invited into a specific kingdom of heaven-like experience. And you don't know when it's going to happen. Therefore, you want to be prepared. So it does seem like this is directly connected to Matthew 24 and all the crises and all the horrific things that are going to happen, including people getting married and and giving in marriage until right up to the like Noah's Ark, until the rain starts, right? Okay. So now let me go through and explain a couple details of this that I did not describe already. So what are they using the lamps for, and what are they using the oil? They're using the lamps to get to the event. In other words, this is the light that is going to give them enough light to get to the groom. Who is the groom? In the Bible, it's mostly God or the divine. All right, so they're trying to find divinity. They're trying to find God. God at his coming, which second coming, Jesus. Okay, so that's what they're trying to do. We're going to be there for his coming, his arrival, when the divine shows up. And to do so, we need lights. And the light is guiding us through the darkness of the city to get there. I thought about the other variations of this, but this is what makes most sense to me. So how am I lighting myself up at night to get to a specific place? And what are the lamps? What do they represent? Why are there women involved? The reason they're lamps is because we have this conception. And the conception is, if I know enough, if I study enough, that the Pharisees and the Sadducees, they were all about scriptural knowledge. They were all about what is written. They were all about the law of Moses, and they memorized it, and they chanted it, and then they interpreted it, and they understood it. When Jesus came, he provided a whole different feminine view of everything, right? These are women. These are not men in this story, which is fascinating because men are not thinking about women at this time. Most men are not, and they're not thinking about women in terms of leadership. But women represent energy, among other things, which is one of the teachings that I have shared a couple of times in the past week. And they're not about the logical. They're not about the consciousness. They're not about, okay, well, if I learn enough, if I memorize these scriptures, if I obey the commandments enough, then I'm going to get there. No, they're feminine, and they're also very experienced. This means when the second coming comes, all of us, doesn't matter who we are going to be very, very inexperienced. We are not the experts. We are not the gurus. We don't, and it doesn't matter how much you know about whatever you think you know. We're just the beginners, because this whole thing, this whole party, compared to what has been before, is on a completely different level. So the party is going to give us a completely different experience if we're ready for it, but we have to be careful to have the oil. What is the oil? The oil is an energetic component. Fire, light, oil, right? It's something you burn. It's an energy. Again, the feminine. So what we're looking for to have oil in our lamps to be able to get to this party is some sort of energy, right? It's not knowledge about the scriptures. It's not even necessarily great faith. It's an energetic component. We need energy to get through it. So, and then half of the people who say, okay, well, I'm going to show up at that party for sure. If we're going to count on the percentages from the story, I'm going to be there, and they're going to show up, and they're going to think I have sufficient energy to get in there, or they don't understand that energy is needed, and extra energy. And I've been noting this. These times are testing our energy right now. There's times people are literally dying because their energetic makeup is not able to hold what's happening right now. They're getting sick, they're dying very young, dying of strange things, and that's an energetic, systemic thing that happens within their bodies, right? So we are used to having a particular level of energy to be able to exist, to be able to live, to be able to make progress, and this energetic component, which we thought was sufficient, is no longer sufficient. And so I've been noticing that. I've been having to raise my energy levels. I've been having to do meditations for it and things to add more energy to my body, because I've been challenged in the last couple of years even more. First of all, aging, but second, just the situations that are, the requirements on my energy have been raising and raising. And I've also been seeing, and this is what's really connected me to this, how in times I've been giving energy away. Here, have some energy. I've got some extra energy. Here, take some energy. It has been depleting me. It's been depleting me way more than it did 10 years ago when I was working energetically and when I was working with healing and learning these things. But now I have to say, whoa, okay, I need all of my energy for myself. I need to be able to take my energy into my own body to be able to actually physically survive right now. And number two, do the things that I want to do to accomplish my preparations to be ready for the party. Okay. So, so many of us have this concept about energy, and it's insufficient to what's actually needed. And a lot of people are suffering, a lot of people are dying. And what's happening is there's a separation happening. You see it happening already. There's two different groups of people, and two giant groups of people. And then even among those who say, okay, I'm prepared, or I believe, there's another several groups of people. And in between that is growing a no man's land. And the no man's land is the place where no one is. It's the wheat and the tares being separated into their two segments. And this goes right along with Matthew 24. And it's exactly here again, wise and foolish. And even those who decided to take the journey and step into it, they're missing the necessary energy from themselves to be able to make it to that level. So the interesting thing is they get sent out in the middle of the night to go shopping. Apparently they were able to purchase and buy eventually. Eventually they saw that they did not have enough energy at the moment when they need it. They didn't recognize it until it was going out. And then they had to do a lot more effort to run and catch up, right? To have that energy that was necessary to light their path to get them to the party. However, time ran out, was too late. So even if they see that at some point, okay, well, I'm going to need more energy for this. Once the things are happening, and you see them happening, right now, I don't know what claim I can make right now, but I think it's safe to say things are quite chaotic right now, regardless of whether this is where we are in the timeline. But things go bam, 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 and you didn't realize you need this much energy for this, and this much energy for this, and more than you thought, and here, and longer, and harder, and a deeper experience, and to be more prepared. And when those things start hitting, all of a sudden you go to zero, your gas runs out, and you don't realize that, and you're like, oh, I need to get gas. Well, the next gas station is so far away, and then you wanted to actually get to the next city by then, etc. And so you're stuck. And you don't get there, right? So I think this is a fascinating parable that's opened up a lot as I've been thinking about it in terms of how can we gather that energy to us? How can we take our own consciousness and bring the energy into our bodies that's necessary to light the path? It's so interesting because why are things so chaotic right now? Because some people are seeing and some people are not. Who is not seeing? Those who don't have light. What does light do? It gives you information, right? It brings information into your eyeball, which is translated in your brain, and then you see something, you understand something. So they do not have light. They're getting the same information as other people, or they're being shown things, but they're not seeing it because they don't have the lights, they don't have the lamp going. And so the map is staying the old map for them, or whatever the world is presenting as a map, and they're not able to navigate to this party that they're being invited to. And their energy level, I keep saying, it's too late now. Like right now, almost in the history of the world, it's too late to say, oh, well, I'm going to start, not watching TV. I'm going to start seeing how things really are. I'm going to start opening my mind. It's really too late. And we may have reached the point where people are saying, well, wait, let me have your lamp. And we're saying, well, I can't really give you this. You have to do the work right now, because now I've got to move. Now I'm living by faith. Now I'm making progress. Now I'm going towards God, the kingdom of heaven, the bridegroom, the party that's happening. And I really can't slow down and stop and explain things to you, ABC, or even give you an infusion anymore of the energy that I wanted to help you move forward. It feels like we're at that point in a specific way right now. And like all this stuff could be at the doors happening in this moment. So those who wish to come along, even if they thought, oh well, I want to be part of this, and you've been tested. I've heard from people on this call about how hard it is to resist, to see, to live the truth. I know, to follow the truth, and we're seeing dramatic results in the world. There were always those results, and I've seen a lot of them for a long time, but the results are Now, even more dramatic, if you're going to live on borrowed light, as it were, if you're going to try to use someone else's oil, if you're going to go the easy way, if you're going to just take whatever is given to you, you can't do that anymore. And the results could be death, basically, physical death right now. The destroying angel coming through, sorting out, okay, who's coming to the party, who's not coming to the party, right? So, yeah, I mean, from my perspective, that looks like what's happening right now. Is it actually what is happening? Well, either way, it would be good to have the lamp. And to do so, one way to gather the energy is right now, right here, what we're doing, pulling in that energy, meditation, anything that we're doing to improve, increase our own light, our own energy within. We see some people see the same information as we do, and they think, oh, I don't see anything, right? Looks like nothing to me. Then you see it and think, oh my goodness, this is so valuable, this is so useful, I know something new, and I need to apply this in my life right now. And so doing those things, clearing out your energy body of blocks, clearing out your consciousness of anything that stops your energy is going to allow you to have the light to be able to see well enough to get to the party, right? To get to the party. And those who show up later, he says, I don't even know you. Well, I told you to be ready. You weren't. You dishonored me. You didn't show up. I don't know you. Okay. So, yeah, what do you think? Any questions? That is, I think, almost everything I wanted to say about that. I purposely didn't write down a lot of extra notes, so that was kind of just from my thoughts today. But yeah, I've never had this understanding of the parable of the 10 virgins before. This is completely new for me, a lot of what I just said. But it feels apropos, applicable, and wanted to be spoken today. So there you go. Good. If there's any comments or any questions, please forward them so that I can have them. Okay, awesome. Well, then one more thing I wanted to talk about, and that was something I promised to talk about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And, well, okay, a week ago. When I was talking about, we have the process of connection and sharing of energy. Someone told me today, okay, I'm interested in masculine and feminine sharing of energy, connecting to energy. I want to write about it. I want to talk about it. And how does it work? And what I said was, we're afraid of intimacy, and we're afraid of connection. And this is why. I want to explain it a little bit because I haven't actually gotten to the edge of that. And that is, we have a conceptual map. Remember, the map doesn't represent the territory, so this fits a little bit to what we said before. Conceptual map about where and when and with whom I'm allowed to share energy. In other words, I'm allowed to share intimacy. I'm allowed to share connection. I'm allowed to dive deep into it. And based on that, we do so. And we have the most lonely, afraid, isolated people in the history of people right now. We have people living alone. We have people feeling disconnected, not understood. And the reason is the map that we have in our head about when we're allowed to connect, how deeply. Yeah, I've had someone say, well, I love you really deeply, but I've got this other person here, and he wouldn't like it if he knew that I loved you deeply. You know, he wouldn't like it if I exchanged energy with you, if I connected to you. You know, this is the map. And the primary maps are within monogamy, within relationships, within marriage, within all these ideas that, well, we're going to shut down how we use this energy. And we're afraid. We're afraid to open energy. We're afraid to follow our intuition. I just posted something on my wall right now that I found. It said, the reason you have a hard time trusting your intuition is because you are still convinced that some outside authority knows better than you. I've had this conversation numerous times in the last 6 months. You have your intuition, but you think, oh, some outside authority is telling me what's up. And you may not even realize you're subject to these outside authorities, whatever they've been historically, family, church, society, the state, your partner, it doesn't matter. And when you're doing that, you've killed the flow of energy. You're receiving less energy. To go back to the parable of the 10 young women, as we're going to call it now, that's one way you're losing your energy. You're not receiving the energy, so you're not going to see as clearly. You're not going to be as powerful. You're not going to be as flexible. And so deciding to follow all these limits that you have to sharing energy, to connecting, is going to cost you dearly. And until you clear these out, these handcuffs, these limits, these issues that you have with seeing clearly what's happening and allowing your intuition, your energy to flow, you're going to have less of a life than you could have. And I've been talking to Allison about it, both society is dying through this, children are dying through this, people who could be supported, loved, connected are dying through this. There was a talk, general conference, which I don't reference a lot, but he said, how many times do you withhold praise, approbation, gratitude, whatever? And how is that sin, right? How are we withholding energy, which goes to the parable of the talents? The one person gets 5,000, the other 2,000, 1,000. The person that moves them in transfer, that energy, shares it, connects. That's the person who doubles it and gets from the person who doesn't. So this is one way we're shutting down our energy. They said one way, Robert Malone talked about mass formation psychosis, but let's just say psychosis, mass psychosis. So we're imagining something that's not true as a group. Mass formation psychosis is an extra word added to that. And the way that happens is, first of all, you have to be isolated. And when you're isolated and disconnected, your context shrinks down tremendously. And this turns into Stockholm syndrome. Whoever's given your information, that's what you see. And first of all, society was isolated. Well, stay in your houses, don't go anywhere, don't talk, don't connect, no church, no nothing. What that serves to do is to blind people and drop down their field of vision to a very, very small level. And then when they hear things, they're only seeing this, and so they tend to act based on this instead of based on all of it, right? So that's what's happening with that, and that is one reason that we're so isolated. We're not sharing energy, and the opposite is to share energy as much as you can, as high as you can, with everyone that you can, to reach that state, to have the maximum light, to have the maximum power, maximum energy. When you're tired, lethargic, sick, whatever, you don't have the clarity that you would otherwise have, right? So that is how that works. And it's really sad that we've limited ourselves so much. We're either in our little couples or we're alone, and then looking for something that's perfect that's never going to come. And the loneliness and the pain and the devastation that happens through that, as well as the neglect of children, is absolutely catastrophic, and it will destroy society. And as has been said, if God didn't step in somehow, it would kill everyone eventually. There'd be no people left. So I'm seeing a question right here. Let me open this up. All right, thank you, Daniela. Yeah, I never did either until today, so that's what came up. Any more questions or comments? Okay, if not, one more thing. I've been studying not just Tantra, but the Agoris of the Tantric tradition for some time. And these are people that, thank you for not making me get dressed, by the way. These are people that run around in the cemeteries naked with ashes from the dead all over themselves. And why? Why would you do this? Because they're trying to do exactly what I'm talking about. Because they're trying to upgrade their maps. Because they're realizing that everything that's been handed to them by tradition, by society, by whatever, by religion, is probably inaccurate. And so they're going back to a primal state to try to update their maps. They're trying to connect to who am I and who is my body. If I get rid of clothes, if I get rid of bathing, if I get rid of money and my watch and my car and everything, who am I then? What is then? What is the essential of me? What is the boiled down, right? And this is just like Jesus says, well, if you're going to follow me, you're going to have to give up your mother and your father and your brothers and sisters and your spouse and your children and your own life. You have to give up, let go of all of this conditioning, of all of this programming, of everything that's been layered on top of you to follow me. And if you're not, then you're not worthy and you're not going to get it. And oh well, you know. And so what they're doing is they're saying, well, let's find the most direct, most intense way to do this. And you can argue that Jesus was saying the same thing. Let's find the way to let go of everything we possibly can and go be this way. No money, no possessions, no contact with family or friends, and just connected with nature for over a decade. 12 years is how long they do that. And then let's see if, number one, I figure out who I really am with all that stripped away. And number two, I can use that as a new map in my life, right? They don't do that forever. They do that for 12 years, which seems like a nice time for me to dive into that kind of life. I feel like I've been doing it for probably about the last 12 years, to be honest. And I still think, what's necessary, you know? Do I need to wash my hair? Do I need to comb my hair nicely? Do I need to be wearing clothes? Do I need to, like, what do I need to do to fit in, to be right in this world? And what is my actual true existence? What is the same no matter when, where, or when I connect to other people, that would be the same regardless of any of that stuff? What is the actual energetic experience and conscious experience that I have with someone when we're connecting that does not include those things, right? What is the minimum, and what is the real when you can't strip any more away? What's left? And that is the extra experience to dive into and think about this week, as I know one of us has been displaced and one of us has chosen a new career path and a lot of things are changing. Like, okay, what else can I let go of? What is not serving me there? What are the beliefs that aren't working? What are the maps that aren't working? And how can I practice through meditation and other things to let go of my mind and find a new way of being, existing, sending my energy into the world that matches who I actually am, instead of who people told me I should be, how people have instructed me to act, and what would happen if I did that? Well, the opportunity is coming very quickly to do that, because reality is being stripped away. 2 years ago, reality started being stripped away very strongly, and things are changing dramatically. And like I said, there's this whole no man's land, demilitarized zone, and then there's people on the right, and there's people on the left, and there's the tension growing between the two. And we're going to have the opportunity to continue to have things stripped away and change our financial systems, our educational systems. A friend of mine said he's teaching in school and sees how it's just not working, and the collapse is imminent. And the medical system, we don't have enough nurses and doctors, and yet we're firing. Like, none of it makes sense anymore. So all of these will be stripped away externally, and internally we can strip away our conceptual maps of how we think we should be or what we should be doing to find freedom to actually interact as our truths, as our true selves, right, within this context. So anyway, that was a little bonus message that I thought if I had time I would mention, and I did, so there you go. All right. Any final comments, questions? Thank you for coming. I enjoyed sharing. I hope it was valuable. Namaste, namaskar, namaskaram. Have a wonderful week, and I look forward to seeing you next time. All my love.